Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago-based MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. Hello. This episode is an excerpt of a masterclass that we had on Tech for Non-Techies about design for technology. And the person who led it is Jane Austen. Jane leads design at Babylon Health, and Babylon Health is the UK's largest digital healthcare provider. Needless to say, they've been busy in the last few months. Jane has actually spent 20 years in the design field and has seen the industry evolve. What I loved about this masterclass is that Jane went through the rigorous thinking that goes behind a design process and shows that the design process is essentially the lean startup process. Jane believes that ignoring the principles of design is the reason why so many startups and corporate innovation efforts fail. So this is a great episode for founders, investors, and corporate executives alike. Without further ado, here's Jane.
I've been working for 20 years in this industry. So I've really seen the evolution of the industry as well as the evolution of my career. I started off in Glasgow. I went to Glasgow University and I got a master's in philosophy, which made me completely unemployable. Unless I wanted to become a philosopher. There's not many jobs for philosophers around. So I went travelling and I taught English as a foreign language all over the world. So all these poor people out there who thought they were learning English were actually learning Scottish. And then I came back to London and got a job teaching refugees for the government. It was actually for Westminster Westminster Council in Westminster Kingsway College. And the council spent all this money on an ICT suite for these poor refugees to learn English. But it was so badly designed. It was before the internet. It was CD-ROMs. These poor refugees were trying to use these tools to learn English. And it was undecipherable. It was so hard to use. And I didn't actually know that this thing was called usability at this point. But I managed to get onto a free course at the same college to do programming of CD-ROMs, which was called Director. And then reprogrammed the CD-ROMs to make them much more intelligible. And I didn't realise that was design. And I didn't realise that any of this was anything to do with designing or usability or UX. This was before any of these things really had a name. In fact, Jakob Nielsen, who was kind of the godfather of Usability, called it at this point the pain with no name. And this really was what it was. So I used this portfolio to get into university. I did another master's in design. And then I got a job in an agency, which went spectacularly bankrupt in the dot-com crash. So I scooped in quite a few of their clients, even though I didn't know what I was doing from a business perspective. So there was people like Conran and D&AD and the Design Museum, some Channel 4. We won loads of awards. We won an interactive BAFTA. We won awards from Nesta. But we didn't make any money because I had no idea what I was doing commercially. It was really interesting. We weren't taught anything like this at university, and also felt really terrible asking for money for what I was doing. I felt like I wasn't worth asking for money. So of course we didn't do very well, but we got acquired by a small agency that got acquired by a bigger agency, and so on up the food chain until I ended up working for a really huge agency, and I realised I didn't like that. So I went client side, and this is when I started understanding there was something called product design. So I went client side and I worked in financial trading. So I helped make financial trading platforms more usable. And then from there, I got a job at the Government Digital Service, which if you're wanting to understand anything about design or product design or agile or development or anything, go and look at the Government Digital Service and their blog. It was basically, they pulled together all the kind of really best people in Britain at that time. I was really pleased to be asked to join. And not that I was the best person, but the person who asked me to join was absolutely amazing, Lisa Riekelt. So I went there and I learned from some absolutely incredible people, but I couldn't work there permanently because I wasn't a civil servant. So I then got a job at the Telegraph, which was wonderful. And we rebuilt the website. We took the app from 1 star to 5 stars. Then I went to Moo. And then I followed my boss from Moo to Babylon, which is where I am now. Yeah.
Some of our audience are not from the UK, so the Telegraph for them is one of the largest media companies in the UK. We've actually had a product manager from the Telegraph speaking.
Yes. So one of the oldest and definitely one of the largest and probably one of the most profitable media kind of groups in the UK. It's print publication, but it's got lots of other things around it as well, like a website, some other products. So when I was there, we launched a financial product and a travel product. And then Moo is a company that everybody just loves. It's just the nicest company ever. Moo makes business cards and print products. And that's something I've really enjoyed, that kind of intersection of something physical and something digital. So rather than being pure play digital, thinking about what the offline experience is like and then how that maps online. So at Moo, people would build something online and then it would get shipped to them. So I found that really interesting. And then at Babylon, we have virtual consultations, and then people actually go to clinics. They get tests sent out. And so we have this combination of virtual and physical wraparound care, which I find really fascinating.
So you are now a director at Babylon Health, which I believe is the largest digital health company in the UK.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm assuming that you're busy these days.
Very busy, yeah. When I joined there was a design team of 4, and then we took it up to like over 90 globally, and it's sort of shrunk again now. And I think at last count there was 57 of us. So at that point, when I joined, there was like nothing existing. There was no career ladders, no design system, or there was a design system, but so we redesigned the app, we rebuilt things, we built the team, we put structures in place, we made the app accessible. It hadn't been until that point, and just set up the whole kind of process and structure of product design in the company.
So this is what I wanted to ask about, because as I was telling you on our call earlier today, and I'm going to embarrass myself, as I always do in front of our audience, that when I first started a tech company and I had managed to raise money, like I had an MBA, I honestly have no idea how I pulled this off, but I didn't know that you needed designers in a tech company, and you needed developers because I read TechCrunch. But I didn't know that designers were necessary. And then when I started kind of finding out that, user experience designers or UX, UI, that's something important, then I honestly didn't think that I didn't think that they could be that important, because I thought, it's about making something lovely and having a lovely logo. And yes, that's important, but technology, that's the really hard stuff.
Yes, I think designers seem to have been quite bad at doing PR for ourselves. Everyone knows about tech, and tech's really important, and everyone talks about tech. But actually, if you don't have, because design, I think, is misconstrued as making things look pretty. But actually what design does, and nowadays it's called product design. And if you work with really good product designers, their job is, and I describe it in 2 ways, is to build the right thing and build the thing right. So build the right thing is understanding customer needs, understanding the marketplace, understanding what you should build that's really going to resonate, that's actually going to be a successful product, doing experiments, like you've all heard of lean startup. Well, a lot of this actually just came from design. This is design techniques where you would prototype, you do rapid prototyping, see if somebody wants something, fast iteration. And then once you understand the direction of travel, then you build the thing right, you execute really well. And this is called I often referred to as the double diamond. And a lot of people misconstrue design, being at the far end of the double diamond where you make things look pretty, but they miss this whole point of how design can massively impact a business. And if you talk about design-led businesses, what that means, I think, is not just businesses that make things look pretty, but businesses which have really deeply understand human behavior and human needs and have created something that is meeting a human need that might in a completely novel way, or solving something that's been a problem that hasn't been fixed. And these, if you look at the very effective startups, it's not just somebody else building another video upload tool. That's really not how you innovate. How you innovate is to work with really good designers and with good tech people to understand human needs, and then to experiment to see, is this something that's meeting this need, or is this something? And then before you potentially even write a line of code, you have the direction of travel for your business. A lot of people miss this. A lot of massive companies miss this too, and just commit huge amounts of resource to building things before they've actually established need. They just make up requirements. And in fact, I saw an advert on Facebook think it was 2 or 3 days ago, and I won't name the large American institution, but they had like a circle showing how product delivery was done, and they had business stakeholder, tech, QA, blah, 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 and then at the very end it came customer. And I thought, that's kind of wrong, isn't it? That is kind of wrong. And no, it sort of explains why so many startups fail, why so many big organizations have these huge initiatives which fail, why digital transformations fail. And I think it's because design, as I said, maybe we're really bad at PR as designers, and we're perceived as something fluffy. And maybe we're not talking in a language that resonates sufficiently. But actually design should be a rigorous business process that really makes a business succeed.
I mean, I've only understood it now, but only after making all of those mistakes and then essentially working with one of the top design agencies that literally they made the app for Channel 4, they made the app for Tesco, and since our app was consumer-facing, Channel 4 and Tesco, it was kind of good to follow in their footsteps. And they thankfully had the patience to essentially teach me all this stuff, because I really didn't know. So, what is user experience design?
Well, I'm not even sure we would call it user experience design anymore. That's a slightly old-fashioned term. And that's another thing about this industry. It's always evolving. I would call it product design. And the reason it's probably called product design nowadays is that UX design is a slightly old-fashioned term, and it refers to sort of trying to understand how something works and sort of stopping at the point of the interface. Nowadays, designers tend to think about the business proposition, how things fit together, and then they also would design the interface as well. And that makes it really quite difficult because you're often searching for a unicorn. So in a organization like mine, we would try to build T-shaped people, the ideal expression where you have people T-shaped, so somebody who has got a broad bit of knowledge and then a deep knowledge in a specific area. So product designers tend to be T-shaped, and ideally you would have a team of people whose T's all fit together to make a nice holistic team, because some people are amazing at interface design, some people are better at the kind of very upfront ideation, and a team would try and put all of these together. In a big organization as well, the designers wouldn't have to be entirely responsible for designing the interface. You would have a design system and a set of rules that they would use to create the interface. So that means you have consistency and people don't have to worry so much about execution. Instead, the designers spend a lot of time. Certainly where I've worked, I've had the designers experimenting, creating prototypes, iterating, trying to really unpack the problem, thinking about things like what's the risk case assumption the business has about this customer? How do we make sure that this is no longer an assumption? How can we solidify our knowledge? How can we combine really good quality research and execution to make sure that we're really building the right thing? And also design should combine with content. I think content's often the sort of the poor relation of design. Everyone forgets content, but content often is the key thing in the interface. So everyone's worrying about the technology and forgets what they're actually going to put in the technology, which is the content. So content is definitely the poor relation of design and technology. And I think that's another thing you should definitely do a podcast on, why content's so important.
I mean, my view, which developers don't like, but my view is that for non-technical founders, or, if you're an intrapreneur and you are working at a large company and you have to essentially work on an idea for, L'Oreal or something, the first people to work with are designers and not developers. And I'd love to know what your advice is on kind of what do you need, what are the steps you need to go through when you're working with a designer before you go to a developer?
So I would probably think about it in two ways. The first thing is I would work with a designer. It doesn't really have to be a designer. It's just someone who knows how to do this kind of thing, which is to really prove market need and to understand what it is that the product needs to do. And you know what? You can do that by putting an advert on Facebook and see if people click. You can do this by taking sketches to coffee shops and seeing if people are interested. It can be very simple initially, just to see if your idea has traction. And then you sort of layer on complexity, and you move from very low fidelity, sketches on a napkin or conversations or just a button on a website, all the way to something that's a lot more complex. But there's a point, I think, where you have to start thinking cross-functionally, which is another issue. You don't just talk to a developer or talk to a designer. you really need to have a cross-functional team as soon as you possibly can, which would be ideally a developer, a designer, and a product person. But the founder would probably take the role of a product person. And then you maybe have a developer who knows how to design, or a designer who knows how to develop. But as long as you're thinking cross-functionally, it doesn't mean that you have to go and talk to 2 or 3 people. And the reason that you have to do this is you have to think holistically about the product. You don't just go and design something that's unbuildable, and you don't build something that nobody wants. And you have to make sure that all of you think like completely holistically around the problem. So start really small, start experimentally. And this is known as lean startup. But lean startup really is something that I've been doing for years. Loads of designers were doing for years before it had a name. It just meant doing like really fast iterations to prove that there was a need. And then you want to make sure that there's this sort of like balance between something that's like beautifully designed and something that's buildable, because you don't want to design something that's going to take you months and months and months to build, or is unbuildable. So you need this dialogue. And as a founder, I think you probably take the product management role and navigate between the developers, the designers, the content people, and the user need to just see what's that sweet spot, what's enough to build to know that you have a business.
I mean, that's exactly the role that I ended up taking.
Yeah.
Essentially, as you know, as the person who is in charge of the money, you have to have deliverables, because you've got to report. So either you're reporting to your investors, or if you are in a kind of founders factory type setting, you've got some kind of overlords to report. We all have an overlord.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I found that we would have design, but we would always need to have some kind of developer essentially giving us an idea of how long that design would take. So
exactly.
We thought, putting in videos would be really great into a particular section of the app. But then once I learned about the hosting costs of the videos, then I was just like, well, and unless people are willing to pay to host their videos on our app, then we can't do it. And then we did some usability analysis, or some user interviews, and we realized that people were not going to want to pay for this functionality. They wanted it, but they didn't want to pay it, but the server costs were too much. So that's a decision that was essentially design plus the developers plus business. Basically.
Yes. And that's how you do good products. That's exactly how you do good products. And we call it, there's a tool, you call it effort versus value mapping. How much effort is this going to take to build or to do versus how much value is to the consumer and value to the business. And if it's too much effort, not enough value, you don't build it. So you can actually do like 4x4 grids. And if it's high effort, low value, why bother building it? If it's low effort, high value, let's do this quickly. If it's high effort, high value, well, let's unpack that a little bit further, maybe do some experiments and some spikes to see, do we really know that it's high value? Is there a faster way to do it? And having this very structured form of decision making and this form of collaboration means you get much better products much faster. And so design isn't like some kind of genius going and sitting in a room and coming up with some beautiful pictures. Design is quite a rigorous structured process that leads you in the same way building a product with tech is a rigorous structured process. It's the same with design. You unpack each part of the problem, you break it into little chunks, you investigate it, you analyze whether or not this is something you should doing it, and then you think about executing. And that's how you get great products. It's not just somebody going off and going, I have this wonderful idea, go and build it. That's usually a recipe for disaster.
If you want to hear the rest of the session, then join Tech for Non-Techies. You'll be able to get the video of the session where Jane actually goes through the double diamond, which you will be able to see, and explains how designers get market feedback, interview users, work with developers, and just how much they actually need to know about technology in order to be a great contributor to a tech product. You can find out more on techfornontechies.co, or just sign up to our mailing list, which is in the show notes. And finally, if you liked this episode, then please give us a rating and a review. It would be super helpful to people like you because it boosts us up the rankings, which means that people like you who are interested in technology can find it. Thanks for listening and have a fabulous day.